Psychology reveals when a woman has had sexual fantasies about you before. Sexual fantasies are one of the most private corners of the human mind. A woman may never openly confess that you've been the center of one of hers, but psychology suggests that fantasies often leave fingerprints on behavior. These clues aren't about general attraction. They're about the specific, more primal ways desire leaks into everyday interactions. Here are 20 surprising, less talked about signs a woman has likely had sexual fantasies about you before. Stay with me until the very last one, because number 20 is the most powerful. Most people miss it completely, but once you notice it, you'll never be able to unsee it. If you're new, welcome. We share daily strategies to help men master dating. Drop a comment below and subscribe for more. 1. She lingers on words with double meanings. When conversation brushes against words that could carry a sexual undertone, notice her delivery. Maybe she says, "That was so hard," or "I can't handle it," then smirks or pauses like her mind just tripped on its own secret. That momentary shift is a psychological slip, her fantasy language bubbling up in ordinary talk. It's not just the choice of words, but the energy behind them. A subtle smirk, a slightly lowered voice, or the tiniest pause after a phrase can betray an inner world she thinks she's concealing. The truth is, when someone has imagined you in private scenarios, their brain sometimes betrays them in wordplay, because fantasy and language are deeply linked. 2. She brings up scenarios where privacy is built in. Most women will suggest group activities or safe, neutral hangouts. But if she casually mentions things like late-night drives, going somewhere secluded, or staying behind after others leave, psychology would call that fantasy projection. She's weaving reality with the same settings her imagination has already played with. Think about it. Our minds tend to recreate in reality the stage sets we've already rehearsed in imagination. If she pushes for contexts where seclusion naturally occurs, that's rarely accidental. Those scenarios mirror the architecture of intimacy in fantasy: dimly lit spaces, quiet rooms, places away from social judgment. 3. She makes jokes about stamina or endurance. Pay close attention to the kind of teasing she uses. Jokes about how long you can last at the gym, how much energy you have, or whether you can handle things. These aren't random. Sexual psychology research shows that humor is often a safe delivery system for forbidden thoughts. The laugh hides the desire. It's a kind of test balloon. If you laugh along, she feels safe that her hidden subtext didn't cause offense. If you miss the implication, she can shrug it off as just a joke. But under the surface, the joke is a coded admission of where her thoughts already wandered. 4. She zones out when you're speaking about nothing intimate. Not bored, but distant, almost glazed over for a beat. That's her mind doing what psychologists call intrusive imagery. She isn't daydreaming about vacation plans. She's unintentionally replaying something more carnal. If you notice her suddenly rejoining the conversation with a faint blush, you've probably interrupted her fantasy in progress. These micro-checkouts often last only seconds, but they're telling. Desire is mentally intrusive. It barges into unrelated contexts. The fact that it happens with you means her inner film reel has a leading man already cast. 5. She shows curiosity about your sleeping habits. A woman who's fantasized sexually about you often asks oddly specific questions about your nights. Do you sleep shirtless? Do you toss around a lot? It might sound playful, but psychologists recognize this as fantasy alignment. Her brain is testing whether her private mental image matches your reality. This isn't idle curiosity. Sleep is one of the most vulnerable, intimate states, and questions about it blur the line between casual talk and fantasy disclosure. If she's weaving you into her imagined night scenes, she's more invested than she lets on. 6. She invents reasons to mention your mouth. It could be your smile, the way you bite your lip when you think, or even how you talk. If she highlights your mouth disproportionately, psychology suggests it's not about aesthetics. It's about fixation. Fantasies often anchor around sensory hotspots, and the mouth is a prime one. Notice the frequency. If compliments, teases, or comments circle back to your lips more than once, that repetition isn't coincidence. It's a psychological tell of the role your mouth plays in her private narratives. 7. She freezes up during accidental touch. With platonic touch, people laugh it off or keep moving. But when a woman has imagined you sexually, even a casual brush of your hand or shoulder can cause a micro-freeze. That second of stillness is her brain cross-referencing the imagined with the real. It's not the touch itself, but the pause after the touch. Her nervous system hesitates, as if she's suddenly aware of the overlap between thought and reality. Sometimes her breath might hitch, or her posture stiffen just slightly. That's the fantasy world colliding with the physical one. 8. She avoids telling you details about her hookups or relationships, not because she wants to hide her past, but because mentioning sexual context around you feels too revealing. Psychology calls this topic inhibition. when someone skips over content that collides too closely with their own private imagery of you. Notice the selectiveness. She might talk openly with friends about her dating life, but when it's you, suddenly the curtains close. Silence, vagueness, or fast subject changes signal that the overlap between real and imagined makes her self-conscious. 9. She remembers moments that exposed your body, even tiny slips, like your shirt riding up, or you stretching after a long day. If she references those flashes weeks later, it's because her brain bookmarked them. Fantasies are often built from brief visual fragments, and her memory replayed those enough that she brings them back up casually. What seems like a fleeting, trivial moment to you can be replay material for her imagination. The fact that it resurfaces in her memory later tells you how much weight her subconscious gave it. Before the next one, I'm curious, have you ever noticed any of these in real life? Let me know in the comments. 10. She suddenly gets more formal after you say something suggestive. If you hint at innuendo, instead of leaning in, she playfully switches to mock professional language. Oh, Mr. Serious now, huh? That formality isn't rejection. It's a psychological buffer. Her mind has already imagined the unfiltered version, so she puts up a pretend wall to stay composed. That exaggerated politeness is like a safety rail. It gives her a moment to hide the fact that your words just aligned with the very imagery she's tried to keep private. 11. She creates accidental moments of isolation. Maybe she slows her pace so you two lag behind the group, or she volunteers to help you with something after others leave. This isn't just liking your company. Psychologically, it mirrors fantasy structure. Private scenes are more arousing than public ones, and she unconsciously recreates that setting in reality. Humans often recreate externally what feels good internally. If her inner theater casts you two in private, secluded roles, don't be surprised if real-life scenarios start tilting in the same direction. 12. She asks about your firsts. First time you lived alone, first time you tried alcohol, first kiss, anything involving milestones. Why? Because sexual fantasies often wrap around initiation. By probing your history, she's indirectly layering her own imagination onto how you might act in more intimate firsts. She's not just asking for trivia. She's creating context, shaping how her mental image of you behaves when novelty, vulnerability, or experimentation is involved. 13. She reacts disproportionately when you describe physical sensations. If you talk about the relief of a massage or the heat of a sauna, watch her micro-expressions. A sharp inhale, bitten lip, or quick glance away. Psychology shows that sexual fantasy links strongly with bodily sensations, so when you describe them, it's like you've accidentally narrated part of her own mental script. Her body responds before her words do. That sudden flicker of reaction is her unconscious mind recognizing overlap between your story and her inner narrative. 14. She remembers your scent more than your words. If she says things like, "You always smell like something I can't place," or notices when you change deodorant, that's a tell. The psychology of scent is deeply tied to arousal. A woman who has imagined you sexually isn't just remembering your opinions. She's cataloging your physical cues. Scent embeds deeply in memory, often linked with emotion. If she's storing your scent the way someone remembers a song, it's because her body is associating it with desire rather than neutral familiarity. 15. She blushes at random, not just when complimented. Not the obvious blush after flattery, but the sudden heat in her face when you say something totally mundane. Psychology calls this affective leakage, an emotional reaction tied not to the present conversation, but to the parallel track in her head. That unpredictability is the key. A compliment explains a blush, but when your neutral words cause the same reaction, it means her inner script is the real trigger. 16. She slows her movements around you, not in a seductive performance way, but in tiny delays, stretching longer when reaching, holding a pose a beat too long. These micro-displays match what psychologists call embodied rehearsal, her body unconsciously syncing to how she's imagined herself around you in fantasy. Think of it like muscle memory from imagination. The mind rehearses, and the body, without conscious planning, begins echoing those rehearsals. Enjoying this breakdown? A quick like really helps, and subscribing means you won't miss the next one. 17. She doesn't flinch at sexual content near you, but reacts differently than with others. If a suggestive song comes on or someone cracks a dirty joke, around others she might laugh normally, but with you she has either an overbright laugh or a strangely tight silence. That shift is her brain editing itself because the fantasy context is too close. The contrast is what matters. It's not how she reacts in isolation, but how different her response is with you. 18. She double takes when you describe exhaustion or stress. When you mention being worn out, drained, or needing a release, watch her reaction. These phrases align with sexual subtext in fantasy psychology. A woman who's never pictured you sexually hears them neutrally. A woman who has? They spark recognition. Sometimes her eyes widen for half a second, or she breaks into an unnecessary laugh. That's the giveaway. 19. She frames compliments around strength and control. Not just "you look nice," but "you seem like you'd be good at taking charge." Or, "I bet you don't let people push you around." Compliments about dominance, stamina, or power are often echoes of private erotic scripts, surfacing as casual remarks. She's not consciously trying to confess. Instead, her brain leaks preference through the kind of praise she offers, revealing the themes of her fantasy. 20. She sometimes goes completely quiet after you touch on intimacy. This isn't disinterest. It's a pause psychologists call cognitive interference. Her fantasy imagery hijacks her real-time speech, leaving her without words. That silence is the mental equivalent of her screen buffering, because reality just brushed against her imagination. If you've ever noticed her going blank after even a light innuendo, it's not because she had nothing to say. It's because her mind was busy managing the collision between fantasy and reality.